A new E-Class used to be the biggest news in the Mercedes world because the best-selling Mercedes of all time is the E-Class. Well, one of its predecessors, at least. But today, the sales king is the Mercedes-Benz GLC. And a further slight, at least to some Mercedes fans, is the new E53 AMG, because this is an AMG with a plug-in hybrid system. And I have to admit, it is a fantastic plug-in hybrid, but I'm not sure it's a very good AMG. We'll talk about why in this video, and why, even though I will say that, I think this hybrid system should be in a whole lot of other Mercedes models. Mercedes loves to engineer variations on a theme, so even though this plug-in hybrid system might sound kind of like the one that's in the C63, it is in fact a unique plug-in hybrid system, and it's not based on a four-cylinder engine design, which is part of what has made the C63 so controversial, even though it does produce nearly 700 horsepower. This system is nearly 600 horsepower or just over 600 horsepower, depending on the option boxes you check. But speaking of variations on a theme, clearly this has all the latest Mercedes design traits up front. The full LED headlights, of course, these use the latest digital LED technology from Mercedes, and these are some of the best headlights you can buy in North America, if you could afford them, of course. We get a lot of shiny black plastic all the way around, a unique grille, of course, helping differentiate the different trim lines in the E-Class lineup, and there are fewer E-Classes than before, because there's no longer a coupe, there's no longer a convertible. Those have been merged into the C-Class lineup with the new CLE. If you want to know more about that one, there is a separate video. But interestingly, you cannot get this plug-in hybrid system, at least not yet, in that CLE coupe or convertible. Now, I don't know about you, but I am not the biggest fan of the shiny black plastic that we're seeing really covering a lot of brand new car models, front bumper and rear bumper, because this shows scratches significantly more easily than the body paint next to it. So really be careful if you're going to wipe down your own car. Make sure that you clean off that bird poop really, really well. For this generation of E-Class, Mercedes decided not to give it an enormous stretch. It's 194.9 inches long in this E53 format, which is about the same size as the outgoing model, and about 4 inches shorter than the new BMW 5 Series. Although, we do get a noticeable improvement in real-world functionality in the back, where the legroom numbers don't always tell the complete story. We'll get into that in just a moment. But as you'd expect from Mercedes, this has the same classic rear-wheel drive proportions that the E-Class has had for some time, and I love the long hood look. This is important, of course, because the E-Class is available with a 3-liter inline-6 engine, and inline-6 engines are pretty long. That's how we get to this really elegant proportion that we find here. But Mercedes has also done a lot of engineering to try and make the passenger compartment as large as possible. Not as big, obviously, as something like a stretched Volvo S90. Of course, that's sailing off into the sunset, but still a reasonable amount of legroom in the back. And if you wanted more, there's always that S-Class. It'd be hard to confuse this with a regular E-Class, thanks to the number of AMG logos we find all the way around, but also the enormous brakes that we find front and rear. Even the rear rotors are cross-drilled, as you can see back here. The E-Class has always been considered the discreet option in the luxury segment, so nothing too flashy is happening back here. We have these distinctive full LED taillight modules that kind of mimic the Mercedes star there. The turn signal is amber and LED, but it's inside this red tinted module, so when the turn lights are not on, it actually appears like the entire module is red, definitely adding to that discreetness in the back. We do have a lip spoiler, of course, because it's an AMG, the red-themed E55 badge there, and quad exhaust tips at the bottom. Now let's get to the controversy, or the controversy, if you will. This is an AMG plug-in hybrid system. But importantly, it is not the same plug-in hybrid system that we find in the C63 AMG. That is a 2-liter technological tour de force with a trick differential, transmission, etc. that gives you 671 horsepower total and a little bit of electric range. It's really focused on performance. It is truly an AMG plug-in hybrid system. This is not quite that same kind of system. It's not that same kind of focus. Now, that's natural, of course, because this is an E53, not an E63, or whatever number they come up with next, because rumor mill tells us there is going to be a more powerful E-Class AMG, and that makes a lot of sense, because there always has been, right? Well, let's talk about this system. Because I love it, I just, again, am not sure it's an AMG system. At its heart is a 3-liter inline-6. good start, right? 443 horsepower, 413 pound-feet of torque. It's mated to an electric motor inside the 9-speed automatic transmission that gives you 161 horsepower, 354 pound-feet of torque. Also really good. The combination, fantastic. 577 horsepower or over 600 horsepower with 0 to 60s as low as 3.3 seconds. But what's definitely different about this E53 than the C63 system is that this is significantly more focused on electric range and efficiency. You get a whopping 42 miles of electric range out of this setup, and actually more in the real world, and 23 miles per gallon combined after that battery has been exhausted. And again, even better than that in the real world. In fact, this system is shockingly efficient and has really fantastic electric range. Even though the battery, it's not that big, 21 kilowatt hours of usable capacity or so, 28 kilowatt hours gross. It's also able to DC fast charge if for some reason you wanted to do that. But perhaps due to the design of this plug-in hybrid system, without separate electric motors in the rear differential, without a separate 2-speed transmission back there, etc., without that sharp focus on performance, it comes across feeling quite normal as far as a plug-in hybrid system goes. That could be good, or that might not be your cup of tea. So why does this system not feel quite AMG? It's difficult to describe. We'll talk about this more in the drive section, but in a nutshell, it doesn't have the same sense of urgency that interestingly more controversial system has in the C63. In that vehicle, even if it's in electric drive operation and you floor it, that engine turns on in an instant. This, it takes a bit more time. This system is certainly more focused, again, on range and efficiency, two things that we don't always associate with those three letters, AMG. Charging happens on the driver's side rear. You can see that we have a J1772 connector and a CCS DC fast charge connector, because this will DC fast charge at a peak rate of 60 kilowatts, as long as you have that fast charge option enabled inside. That's about as fast as a last generation Chevy Bolt. In most Mercedes models, the general design of the front seat has not changed in a while. So we still have inflatable side bolsters, an extending thigh cushion that sort of curls up from the bottom, 4-way adjustable tilt telescopic steering column, power adjustable head restraints, and of course all that's controlled via the touch controls over there on the door. The driver and front passenger both have 3-position memory and heated and ventilated seats. I generally find these seats quite comfortable, and I love the way that the lumbar support is adjusted. I'll show you that in just a moment, but there are more comfortable seats out there, for my body shape at least. I do find the seats in the 5 Series just a little bit more comfortable, also the Volvo S90, although that's been discontinued, and there really has never been a corollary performance-wise to this E53 in the Volvo lineup. Jumping into the back is pretty easy, but because of the roofline and the sloping door opening, not quite as easy as a Mercedes GLE, or even a GLE Coupe, which is kind of the 21st century E-Class sedan in a way. This front seat's all the way back in its tracks. I have about 3 inches of legroom left. From here you can see the eccentric way those headrests move up front. This is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, of course. There's a pretty aggressive hump in the middle. On this side, I have a rear-facing Kleck base station because I have a 6-week-old at home, and I have no problem getting it in and out, or actually putting that child seat in the vehicle with the front seat adjusted for me. According to Mercedes, we have 77.1 inches of legroom with the front and second rows combined. But in reality, this feels roomier than that number would indicate. It is a little bit below the 5 Series, but remember the 5 Series is about 4 inches longer than this. Still very generous for adults back here. You can see how much legroom I have with this front seat adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, and certainly enough clearance for a rear-facing child seat. I can actually have moved that seat back further if I'd wanted to and still be comfortable and safe with both of us in the vehicle. The seat bottom cushion, it's a little bit lower to the ground than something like the GLE or the GLE Coupe, but still, again, pretty comfortable. And they fold 40-20-40 fashion, allowing you to put those larger items inside. That's a lot more practical than a regular ski pass-through. Here's a closer look at the yellow shoulder belts and yellow accents in this Edition 1 trim. Here's also a closer look at the ISOFIX or latch anchors for child seats. These are really easy to use as far as rigid anchors go, but the doors, those are a little odd because we have this rubbery flap and then a hard plastic bit on top. If you push them in, they kind of go behind the latch anchors, really making it easy to install, especially those rigid anchors, but you kind of have to fish out and around to pull them back out. The center shoulder position comes out of the seat itself, but the buckle here is a little bit offset. So if you do put a child seat in there, keep in mind it may be skewed slightly to one side, but it doesn't interfere with the outboard seat belt over here just behind the driver. On this side, you can see the after effects of accidentally inserting your ISOFIX seat there kind of under the flap, I guess you'd say, because here you can see that rubber flap is not poking out quite right, and it doesn't look like this one over here. That's part of why I don't like this. After some time, it seems like they just kind of look a little bit sad and lazy. Thanks to the location of the battery pack, which is more or less under the rear cargo area, we do get a slightly smaller trunk than average. 13 cubic feet is happening back here. That's enough to put 22-inch roller bags in this position and slide them that far forward up against the rear seats. You could line about 4 of them across the back and maybe put another one up front, but in the 24-inch roller bag test that we do, 24-inch roller bag test that we do, this definitely scored below some of the competition, and I was only able to squeak 2 of them back here just due to the general dimensions. As you'd expect, the interior is very modern Mercedes. This flashing light here is not visible to the human eye. That's part of the driver monitoring system. We have ambient lighting all around the interior, including this sort of knurled section right there around the controls for the moonroof and, of course, the powered shade. Again, we have one big pane up front, that second pane behind, 4-way adjustable head restraints. 2 ways are manual, 2 ways are powered and memory linked. We have the AMG logo embossed there, and of course the embroidered Edition 1 logo as well, with another AMG logo below that. Lots of yellow seat belts, as you can see. Pretty aggressive side bolstering, although for my body shape I had no problem finding a comfortable position because these are not too tight around the shoulder area. The seats are perforated because they're heated and ventilated. Moving over to the front doors, lots of soft touch materials going on in here, as you'd expect. We have more yellow stitching there, the ambient light strip that runs all the way across the doors, and it's a different color in the rear, so you can see just back there. So that's red back there in the back, and that matches this 2-tone adjustable color scheme that we have going on in this model right now. Soft touch materials are happening also down there at the bottom of the door, a slush molded plastic over there, and then a carpeted inside to that bottle holder. This one has the optional Burmester audio system that you'll find in a number of different AMG and E-Class models, and of course the 2-screen infotainment system here in the dashboard. The passenger screen, it's a little bit more useful than some vehicles that I have seen out there because you can adjust things like comfort options here. So if the passenger wants to adjust their seat massage, you can do that in there. We have various different apps available, performance, track pace settings, even Disney Plus over there. Lots of shiny black plastic around, however. I am concerned that that might start scratching more easily over time. In the middle of everything, of course, we have this absolutely enormous touchscreen system that features Apple CarPlay and Android Auto support, and of course, a full screen mapping interface right there. Let's go to the comfort screen so I can show you the lumbar support here, because again, I think this lumbar support adjustment is fantastic. You basically just draw how you want the lumbar support to look in the seat, and the seat just makes that work. We have inflatable side bolsters. You can adjust the heat settings on the seat. We have massage there, of course. You can adjust the ambient lighting in that screen as well. But because this is the AMG model, we also have a bunch of different screens here for things like power coming in and out of the electric motor there. So right now the electric system is using some power because the air conditioning is running. And you can see that's being generated by the engine, which is at idle right now, producing 3 horsepower, 21 pound-feet of torque to actually power everything there. There's some vehicle screens here to show you, for instance, steering angle. We do have the 4-wheel steering system in this vehicle, so it's going to show you that rear system there. We can see battery voltage and current, energy flow, things like that. Pretty full-featured system right there. Now below this we have a short access button, or a quick access button rather, to take you over to the charging settings. This is going to be important if you want to DC fast charge your plug-in hybrid, because if you enable this, it's going to charge at 60 kilowatts. If you don't enable that option, then it's going to be only 20 kilowatts DC fast charging there. And this display is active, so it's going to tell you what your DC fast charge potential is at this moment. The battery is not quite warm, so we're at 59 kilowatts, so pretty close though. Also another direct access button to vehicle settings, the AMG options there, hazard lights, power, and then a volume touch slider. I'm not the biggest fan of that. What I am a fan of though is the fact that we actually have the modern touch of digital vents in this system, but they are also manual. So you can just wiggle this knob around to direct air wherever you want it to be, but you can also let the car choose where you want that to be, and you can see that it actually will power the air vents. So it takes a while for it to actually move, but you can see that is averted, that is uniform. We can have it adjust over there to the head, and that's going to adjust not just the inboard vent, but the outboard vent as well. Back here at the center console, we have carbon fiber accents, the E53 logo there, of course. Under this, we have kind of an oddly located phone charging mat, because if you are using this cup holder here, which rotates out like that, then it makes using that charging mat really tricky. And then we have this cup holder, which doesn't roll out of the way. It's always there in place. Little sort of knick-knack holder, 2 USB-C inputs. Of course, it does support wireless smartphone integration, so you don't need to use this if you don't want to. And then we have a bifold opening center console with 2 more USB-C charge ports there, and a little bit more room inside than we find in some rear-wheel drive vehicles. Up here we have a full color head-up display. They are pretty tricky to film, but we have a lot of adjustability in that display, and you can actually see the designs here in this screen. So let's go ahead and clear these options here because the car says it's going to want to turn off. Head-up displays are notoriously difficult to film, so I'm going to show you what it looks like using the touch controls over here on the steering wheel and the instrument cluster, because if I hit the home button and then swipe up, you can see the various different looks for the head-up display there: track, pace, race, super sport, the standard display, etc. And then you can also see the layouts of the instrument cluster here. You can choose between a bunch of these different options. Track, pace, I think that super sport or sport is probably my favorite. There's also a navigation view, an assistance view, and the kind of boring service view. I'm not quite sure who really wants to see that all the time, especially in an AMG model. Moving out from there, though, we have a pretty typical AMG steering wheel for a modern Mercedes. Sort of a 5-spoke design with these split side spokes and then the split bottom spoke. Maybe I guess you could say 6-spoke. Big paddles on the back. These will function as regenerative braking paddles if you're in the electric drive mode right there, and then shift paddles in all of the other drive modes. These controls over here control that multifunction LCD instrument cluster. These controls will allow you to interact with the central display using the touch controls rather than actually touching the screen. One thing I would like to see, though, is a better volume knob, because instead we have this touch volume slider that is kind of tricky to use. Over here we have the controls for the adaptive cruise control system, and then, very like other modern AMG models, these selectable knobs below. So you can touch this touchscreen section and change what this little toggle will do. So right now, it is going to adjust the suspension between those 3 modes, but I could also make it engage or disengage the manual shift mode there, AMG Dynamics, the engine augmented sounds, etc. This one is the drive mode button over here, so you can rotate it around to choose your different drive modes, and depending on the vehicle options, you can also press it in to, for instance, a shortcut to certain drive modes. Depends on the vehicle. In this one right now, it is not doing anything by just pressing and holding. On the far side of the steering wheel, we have the headlight controls and this very eccentrically shaped air vent. You can see just barely that by moving this toggle around, it is moving the vanes in this upper section, even though this knob is the only part that's visible. And then this is the knob to open and close the vent. I did find it difficult with this vent, especially on the side, to direct air exactly where I might have wanted it to be on my face. Before we talk about the numbers in this E53, we need to talk about the differences between this plug-in hybrid system and the one in the GLC 63 and the C63. If you want to know more about that system, of course, in great detail, check out the GLC 63 video. In a nutshell, though, that hybrid system has the motor in the back connected to the rear differential with a 2-speed transmission. That means the motor is not sending power through the 9-speed automatic transmission, like this system is. In that vehicle, the engine and transmission can be shifting, doing whatever is best for them, whereas the motor in the back, it has 2 gears to choose from, and it can do what's best for it. Also, that means that you get immediate power delivery even when the transmission is shifting. So between gear shifts, that motor in the back in the GLC 63 is still roaring along, delivering you 200 horsepower. This system is definitely different. Thanks to the big battery pack and the big electric motor, this is able to stay in EV mode for a lot longer than many plug-in hybrids. This will actually go about 85 miles an hour in EV mode before it needs to turn on the gasoline engine, as long as you're not too heavy with the throttle, of course. But getting up on the open highway, not a problem. Even hill climbing, driving on your favorite winding mountain road in a surprisingly spirited fashion, no problem as well. And when this is in electric mode, it's still all-wheel drive, because the electric motor is driving the vehicle through the transmission. Now, because of that, you will feel the transmission shift when you're in electric mode, and that's a little bit different than the GLC 63. If you want to know more about that 4-cylinder AMG plug-in hybrid system, be sure and check out that video on the channel. In a nutshell, though, That 4-cylinder AMG plug-in hybrid system has a really cool differential in the back. It basically incorporates an electric motor and a 2-speed transmission. Yep, that one has 2 transmissions, and that's critical because that one does not have to wait for the transmission to shift to keep delivering power from the electric motor. So the transmission in the back has a high speed and a low speed. Basically in your 0 to 60, it's just in gear 1, and it's going to deliver constant 200 horsepower in that 0 to 60 run. Meanwhile, the 4-cylinder engine and the 9-speed automatic transmission up front, those are shifting through the gears like you would normally see in a 0 to 60 run. But it means that the shifts feel not only lightning fast, but it feels like you're still accelerating even when you're shifting, because the motor is giving you 200 horsepower in the back, well, in the back and in the front, thanks to that mechanical all-wheel drive system, even when the engine and transmission are doing their thing up front. This is different. If I shift this over to the sport mode, for instance, and then floor it, you will feel those very definite shifts like you would feel in a normal sports car, because the design is basically the same. Engine and transmission together are giving you that 577 horsepower, and all of that is going through the 9-speed automatic transmission and, of course, the 4-wheel drive system here as well. That results in a very different feel than we find in the C63 or GLC 63. It's not bad, it's just different. But it is more like the feel that we find in a plug-in hybrid Grand Cherokee or a plug-in hybrid Land Rover, because the design is basically the same, although some companies use bigger and smaller electric motors and bigger and smaller battery packs in the rear. Of course, when everything is working together, this model will go 0 to 60 in our testing in 3.6 seconds. Obviously, that is slower in EV mode. And if you choose the optional dynamic pack, it's 3.3 seconds because that bumps power up to 604 horsepower thanks to improved software with the battery and the electric motor. 60 to 0 stopping distance, still a pretty impressive 104 feet, likely due to the lower center of gravity here, even though this weighs about 5,300 to 5,400 pounds. Exact curb weight details seem to be a little bit difficult to find, but this is certainly well over 5,000 pounds here. And that definitely has an impact on the handling because we have that big battery pack in the rear versus the 4-cylinder AMG system, which has a 6 or 7 kilowatt hour battery pack. This battery pack is nearly 30 kilowatt hours. It's definitely more than 3 times the size of that battery pack, and that's how we get the fantastic electric range. On the downside, when you start pushing this harder, it's definitely going to feel heavy in the rear. I don't have exact weight balance numbers on this model, but it definitely has a heavy rear end, and you will feel that in the corners. It does have a solid planted feel, don't get me wrong, but heavy is definitely the first word that comes to mind. So you want to be a little bit more careful in some of these corners. Now, on the skid pad, it actually doesn't seem to affect it too much. 0.94, 0.95 Gs, depending on who's been able to get this out on the skid pad, thanks to the sticky tires that are nice and wide. But just bear in mind, you're not going to be able to push this as hard as some of the AMG E-classes that have come before it. Still good, but, you know, not quite as AMG as I would like. Now, in the comfort mode, which I think more people are going to be using, that's where this is going to feel maybe a little bit too normal to me. It's going to feel very much like a regular plug-in hybrid out there. You're going to get strong recuperation, about 120 kilowatts are able to go back in the battery at any given moment, but the pedal feel, it's a little bit unusual because of that regenerative braking. It's not as smooth and as linear as the C63 or GLC 63 system. And interestingly enough, when I'm in the Sport Plus drive mode, it doesn't try and regenerate quite as much as I thought. I had assumed that to help improve your brake life on road surfaces like this, when you're driving it more aggressively and you're going accelerator, brake, accelerator, brake, accelerator, brake, that it would try and regenerate more, but it actually dials the regen back a little bit. So I am a little bit worried about brake lifetime and brake overheating if you really are romping on the pedal a lot on your favorite winding mountain road. I found it actually a little bit, not better, better's not the right word, but more cohesive with the vehicle's overall dynamics to actually leave this in comfort mode most of the time. The slightly softer suspension works better for me. 51 PSI in those rear tires leads to kind of a brittle ride in the back. You can soften it up if you drop the pressure in the back by 15 PSI, use the low load setting that's on the door sticker over there. That definitely improved the ride quality. But of course, you're not going to be able to put as many people and as much luggage in here if you do have that on the lower pressure setting. Let's get back to the scores. When it comes to the handling, I'm going to give this an A- because of that slightly heavy rear end feel. Ride quality, I'm going to have to give that a C, because these low profile rear tires pumped up to 51 PSI, even with this adaptive suspension, it's just not as comfortable as I would think a mid-level AMG sedan should be. Certainly not as comfortable as mid-level E-classes have been in the past. The tire size and therefore the tire pressure definitely seems to have an impact on cabin noise. You'll really hear those small imperfections coming into the cabin, freeway expansion joints, the spiderwebby pavement that we're running over here. You'll really hear that in the cabin, along with, again, the interruptions in the ride quality. Right now we are in the most comfortable drive mode here. You really feel these bots dots coming through into the cabin, and certainly hear them as well. I think that Mercedes could have gotten away with a slightly higher profile tire. Bear in mind the 21s are optional, so you could get a slightly higher profile tire if you want, and therefore you could get away with a slightly lower tire pressure as well. I think that would have just been a better fit here for me personally. Now, on the other hand, we get fantastic fuel economy. This is EPA rated for 42 miles of electric range, 23 miles per gallon after that has been taken up. Our test loop is 58 miles long. In our test loop, where you are going up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass twice in that 58 miles, this got 47 miles of electric range and 33 miles per gallon after that. So this is a fantastic plug-in hybrid system. And don't get me wrong, I love this plug-in hybrid system. If I were to buy a new Mercedes, this is the exact drivetrain I would want in it. The 6-cylinder engine feels fantastic. The electric operation is very useful, nearly 50 miles of electric range. Pretty efficient too, about 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour or so, according to the instrument cluster. Actually, probably slightly better than that in the real world. And 33 miles per gallon of combined driving range. The question is it a real AMG? And that is where I start to struggle a little bit. Again, this may be just a mental block because this is a mid-level AMG. It's not a full-on AMG. But it just doesn't feel as connected as other mid-level AMGs have felt in the past. The way the transmission and the electric motor and the regenerative braking and the way everything is working together, the added weight, the tire pressure in the back as a result of that added weight, all of that together just comes apart just a little bit for me. And maybe if this was an E530 without the AMG and 19-inch wheels on it, a little bit more cushion and a slightly softer suspension and a little bit more sound deadening, then maybe that would be sheer perfection. But this is still really close. As far as pricing goes, the E-Class is definitely more expensive than the majority of the competition. And I suppose rightfully so, because over the last few years especially, Mercedes has been trying to reposition themselves not necessarily as a direct competitor to the other German options, but maybe as something a semi-step above, a semi-step more premium, more expensive, more exclusive. And when you look at the actual transaction prices and the average transaction prices for Mercedes models, it definitely seems to be working because they definitely seem to be going for a lot more cash than the average BMW or Audi that they're cross-shopped against frequently. Now, the E-Class for 2025 starts at $62,450 plus destination to get you a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. I would probably skip that. I think that the 2-liter turbo is just a little bit coarse and maybe a little bit slow for the general vibe of the E-Class. I think the E450 is a pretty good sweet spot. It starts at $70,850. That gets you the same basic 3-liter turbo that I was driving, only without the plug-in hybrid system and without the AMG bits. Now, bear in mind, we're talking about base prices, and as we see in pretty much every Mercedes model, you can add thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, really, worth of additional options and feature packages, etc., to any of these models here. So these prices will escalate very rapidly, and there's going to be a great deal of overlap. You can get a fully loaded 2-liter turbo version of the E-Class well into that 3-liter price point, so you have to decide which features you want versus how much power you want. And of course, how badly do you want that plug-in hybrid system? Because that's going to be at least $88,000 plus destination there to get you the E53. And of course, we aren't even talking about an upcoming E63 or 65 or whatever number they might give us there. But the E53 is a little bit interesting because it doesn't really have a direct competitor. And I would argue that
actually, the E-Class doesn't really have much of a direct competitor other than the 5 Series anymore either. That $88,000 model is interesting because in the BMW lineup, and we should talk about the 5 Series now, in the BMW lineup we do have a 550e, which kind of sort of competes with it, but at 483 horsepower, $74,800 starting plus destination, it doesn't have the AMG subfocus. It's not an AMG model at all or an M model at all. And the E53 is the entry-level AMG, but there's still none of that going on in the 550. Now, I kind of like that. I think that the 550 is softer, more comfortable, more relaxed. It's kind of maybe some of more of those classic Mercedes vibes, to be perfectly honest. And I do like the infotainment system a bit better than the Mercedes system. But of course, if you wanted to go faster, there is the M5, and the M5 is the bonkers, V8 fire-breathing M5 that we've come to know, and we don't have that corollary in the Mercedes lineup. So, kind of intriguingly, the 540i and the 530i probably are the ones with the most overlap in the Mercedes lineup. The 550e and the E53, they're going in kind of different directions. And the Mercedes doesn't have the range that we find in the Mercedes on the electric side. I could see a decent number of executives, especially here in the Bay Area, maybe New York, some places like that, really being interested in the AMG plug-in hybrid because there's a little bit of greenwashing going on, if I'm perfectly honest. There's also the convenience of not having to stop for gasoline very often if you don't want to, but then you have the fun factor of all that power when you do want it. In my daily driving, even though I did not spare the accelerator pedal when I wanted all 500 and something horsepower on tap, I probably could have gone about 2 months without ever filling the car up. And there is a certain luxury to that. So it's not just about greenwashing. I could see some rational thought process behind the better fuel economy and the EV range being a kind of a luxury in its own right. And remember that the people that are buying these, if you're watching this and you're wondering, you're probably not really in the market for one, I'm guessing, but the general demographic that's going to buy an E53 has the wherewithal, has the funds, and has a single-family home where they can charge. So I don't think any of that really is too big of an issue. Now, we should talk about the Cadillac and the Audi next. First up, let's talk about the Audi, because it is the other German option here. Well, it isn't, because we don't have one anymore. We have the new Audi A5, which is sort of the merging of A4 and A6 together. But it's neither one nor the other, and it's certainly not where the E-Class is. We also don't know exactly where Audi is going to go in the future now that they've maybe decided to dial back their EV ambitions just a hair, but we all know that sedans aren't selling as well as they used to. So I wouldn't expect Audi to, try and create some sort of new A7 that was a merging of A6 and A8 together. That doesn't seem overly rational, and we don't have any indication of that at the moment. So basically, A6, if it's still kicking around on the lot, that's the old model. The A5 is the new one, and it's not really the same thing as the E-Class. It's really gone more down market. Price-wise, it's going to be a lot closer to that C-Class in general terms. The Cadillac, though, that is an interesting twist because CT5 is not too far off the size of the E-Class, although on the inside, it's not quite as roomy feeling as the E-Class. And you can get the Caddy relatively expensive because the CT5V is there, starting at $61,000 approximately, plus destination. I think that's a fantastic deal. That gets the twin-turbo 6-cylinder engine. But there's also the bonkers Blackwing, and at $99,095, that is more expensive than the E53, theoretically starting, but you get a lot more in that model. And you get a fire-breathing supercharged V8 and a manual transmission if you want one. The problem with the Cadillac is that it hasn't had as much TLC to the interior as it's had under the hood. So it has a thoroughly modern 10-speed automatic transmission, which I think I like. I also like the manual transmission. If you really want to row your own, I probably would go for the automatic, though, because that's a lot of power to handle. 668 horsepower, rear-wheel drive with a manual. It is definitely a lot to work with. But the chassis tuning, I think, is quite simply better on the Cadillac. And that's something that shouldn't surprise because Cadillac has actually had some really great driving rear-wheel drive sedans. It doesn't translate to the bigger vehicles or the SUVs, etc., but the sedans, the rear-wheel drive sedans in this last generation, those have been definitely a stroke of genius and magic when it comes to the chassis tuning. Absolutely perfect there. But the interior, the tech, the comfort, that is all, it's kind of a hard sell. If you really love that Mercedes cabin and you hop inside the Cadillac, I don't think that the V8 sound and the manual transmission are going to do it for you unless that's what you already wanted in the first place. So for me, the E-Class kind of stands alone. And the wagon is really going to stand alone because it does appear that we are going to be getting the E53 plug-in hybrid wagon. And I have to admit, if I could sell a kidney, I could see myself wanting that wagon. I've always had a soft spot for wagons. I think the plug-in hybrid system is all kinds of fantastic. And that is a blend that we just haven't seen too many car companies give us in North America. Volvo is getting out of the wagon game. We don't really see many wagons from really anybody but Subaru. But Mercedes, thankfully, seems dedicated to this particular format. It's not as practical, as convenient as wagons have been in the past. And it's not quite where we find, of course, the Audi RS Avant, but I think it's a really good middle ground with that practicality of that plug-in hybrid system, that luxury of that not stopping for gas every now and then. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. And would you E53 sedan or would you E53 wagon? See all of you later.